Hi, everyone. So today we are going to be doing the second webinar of our series. It is about tasks planning a Microsoft project. In our first webinar, which was last week, we looked at getting started with project, how to navigate through the views, how to get familiar with the interface. And today we are going to start actually building out the project schedule and talk about some of the best practices that have to do with building your schedule and how to structure and that kind of thing. So my name is Amanda Kuhlman. I am the operations manager here at Intigent. I have been here for 6 years, and I've been working with Microsoft Project and Project Online and project management for that time. We use Microsoft Project internally ourselves to manage our ongoing projects for both training, consulting, report building, you name it. We have done it before. And as you can see, I'm certified in managing projects and portfolio with Microsoft PPM, Microsoft Project 2013 and 16, and with managing SharePoint. So as I mentioned, this is part of our webinar series. We covered modules 1 and 2 last week, which is about walking through the interface of Microsoft Project and then defining the project, which is setting your project calendar, setting the project name, how to save it, how to create different templates using that. We have posted that on our website, so if you would like to go back and take a look, that is available for you to view. And so today, since task planning is quite a lengthy subject and there is a lot involved when it comes to task planning, we have broken this module into 2 different sections. And so today will be part 1, and then part 2 will be at the same time next week. So if you haven't yet registered, it's on our site. Just go in there. It's free. And so for today, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to start by talking a little bit about us, a little about Intigent, who we are, what do we do. And then we're going to jump into our tasks planning. And during that, we're going to cover task mode, which is how you schedule your tasks, work breakdown structure. We're going to talk about summary tasks, tasks and milestones, task types, and then finally, we are going to estimate work and durations for the tasks we've entered. So Intigent, who are we? We are a consulting firm where our primary focus is Microsoft Project, Project Server, and Project Online. Project is the desktop client. It can be just local, it can be your own. And then Project Server and Project Online is when you take that and you scale it to an enterprise level. It allows that visibility across projects or portfolios for organizations. And so, depending on your use, you could use one, you could use a combination. We are expanding into SharePoint and Dynamics right now. So if you do have an interest in that, feel free to contact me or one of us, and we'd be happy to talk that through. We implement on Project and Project Online. We train. We help people talk about their project management processes and how you can use Project to supplement that and to help track your progress and display that for executives. We are Microsoft Gold Partner Certified in Product and Portfolio Management. That means that our organization is recognized by Microsoft for the PPM services that we provide, and several of us on staff have taken certifications and exams so that we can achieve that, because it is the highest level of partner level we can get with Microsoft. So a brief recap of what we did cover last week. I'll walk through just these steps here, and then I'll pull up project, and we'll quickly go through a couple of the things that I think are important for us to talk about that we did last week. So during the last week's webinar, we covered setting project options, which is the back end part of project, which was always recommended to look at and set those settings before you jump into scheduling your project. It can determine a lot of things about how your tasks and your schedule will flow. We also looked at several project views, the most common ones, and we'll look at those again here in just a second, about what each one's used for, why you might need to use this one over another, and how to view the same information in a couple of different ways. We also looked at the out-of-the-box reporting in Microsoft Project. We do have another webinar, it's several weeks from now, I believe in November, that will be looking at reporting more specifically. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And then we started defining our project. We looked at how to create the project, how to set the start date, how to set the project calendar, in addition to holidays, work days, any days that are considered non-working in your project schedule. So here is an example project that I have, and we're just going to run through, like I said, real briefly what we covered last webinar before we jump into this one. We did look at project options first. So we're going to go to File and then Options down here. And we did cover a lot in our last webinar. But on this one, the main ones we're going to focus on are primarily in this Schedule tab here. This is very important for our task planning because it will determine how your project schedule is going to flow. It's going to determine what does project know is a working time for both your tasks, your resources. This is what's going to tell it what your default options are. As you do your task planning, you can change that. You can have that be a little bit different if you need to, but this is where project will pull that default information from. So this top option up here is about calendar options. If you make any changes to this, make sure you flip this switch to all new projects. And this is where you can tell project what your work week starts on. Does it start on a Sunday or a Monday? Two most frequent ones. Same with fiscal year and your start time and end time. It can make a big difference in your schedule if you have an 8-hour day or if you have a 6-hour day when it comes to how many days is it going to complete a task. So make sure if you do have a change for any of these defaults, you make that here. The next one we are going to pay attention to for today is this in the scheduling options down here. The new tasks created in auto scheduling mode. We talked about this last week and we're going to talk about it again later today. But the difference in manually scheduled and auto scheduled sticks with how dynamic you'd like your schedule to be. If you have a manually scheduled tasks, project is going to do less of the work. Whereas if you have an auto scheduled task and you create your tasks and you link them, you're going to let project do a lot of that scheduling work. It's going to allow you to have a very dynamic schedule as it progresses. And so we always recommend, and I have my settings on auto scheduled for that as well. This default task type here, we're going to talk about that a lot today too. There are 3 different options. There is fixed units, fixed work, and fixed duration. And so depending on the kind of information you're looking to track, whether it's work, effort of your resources, or whether it's duration, the number of days it's going to take a task, it will determine what you should set your default task type as. You can change this at the task level, but again, this is where that default setting will be. The last option here that I would like us to talk about is in the Advanced tab. It talks about the project summary task. And the project summary task is the highest level of the project plan. Where is it? Oh, there it is. It's right here under display options for this project. Again, you'll want to make sure you flip this switch, but the project summary task is this line 0 up here. By default, it's off in your version of project, but it will allow you to see a roll-up of your entire project schedule all in that one line. I like to have mine on. It gives me that quick look at what's going on in my schedule without having to dig through or create some funky links in my schedule. So here is where you can have that set to be on all of the time, which we do recommend that you do. So a couple of the views that we looked at was the Gantt chart, which is this view here. It's real good for making edits to your plan, for entering tasks and information about your schedule. As you can see here, it's a combination of a sheet on the left and a timescale on the right. So you have whichever way you'd like to see your schedules. It's both available to you here. We looked at resource sheet, and this is a sheet view. This is where you can enter and maintain a list of all the resources that are going to be on your project. You can assign them data points here, and it will carry over with them when you apply them to tasks. We also looked at our task sheet, which is similar to the resource sheet and to the Gantt, actually, except it doesn't have a time scale, but it just lists information about your tasks here. It's a very task-centric view. You can apply different tables to this if there's other information you'd like to see, such as you want to see cost information. You can apply a cost table, and it'll give you that information at a task level. We also looked at different usage views. We looked at a resource usage view, which shows you information in your project schedule, first by resource and then by task. You can also apply different filters here. If you need to be able to see any of your tasks, you can use the scroll. It's a very easy way for you to see exactly where each of your resources are spending or plan to be spending their time. You can apply different tables here as well. Again, if you'd like to see cost, you can see exactly how much is a project manager costing me for this project. We looked at the timeline view. In the View tab up here, you can select timeline, and we looked at how to modify that, how to add tasks, and how to customize that for that really easy high-level view of your project schedule. We get a lot of requests about customizing this for executives because it does allow you to pick and choose what you want them to see right here on your timeline. Go ahead and turn that one off. We also talked about defining our projects. We looked at how to create different templates, how to use different templates either from a blank project or from one of the Microsoft offered templates. We also looked at how to create your own template and save it in a very specific location, how to create that. And then we looked at project information. And this is where you can determine the start date, primarily the start date and the calendar for your project. This is what we focused on anyways in our first webinar, because right now that's what is most important for us just to get started. We looked at setting our project calendar. What do we need to do if there are certain days that are holidays? Well, we would enter them right here in the exceptions. We would say we have a holiday and it's coming up. We're going to go ahead and make Halloween a holiday, schedule it right here. I have officially made Halloween a non-working day for my schedule. Any tasks scheduled on that day are going to skip right over it. So we looked about how to set that for your calendar, for your project as well. If you have a different work week from the default, which is the standard 8 to 5 days a week, you can set that here. You can click on your default, click on details, and you can flip through each day and you can modify what is the working time for my project. Go ahead, cancel out of here. So those are just some of the things. I know it was a very quick overview that we did talk about before. And so having all of that set up now, we are going to jump into today's webinar, which is getting a little bit more comfortable with building a project schedule. Oops. So today we're going to focus on task planning. There are a couple of different steps that are required for this or that we recommend you go. The first one is entering your tasks, which is just how it sounds. It's you put your work into manageable pieces, which are your tasks. Then you do the estimates for them. It can either be work or duration, or sometimes you have both, and how you can do that. We'll review whether you have a work schedule that you need to focus on if that's what your organization looks at, or whether you have a duration-based, a time schedule that your schedule works at. And those are the two that we're going to talk about today. And then next week, we're going to look at the task dependencies, which are how you link your tasks. How can they relate to one another? And then we're going to look at setting constraints and deadlines. Constraints allow you to have some either flexible or rigidness when it comes to scheduling your tasks. And deadlines mark parts in your project schedule that are deadlines for you to be aware of so you can see, but they do not affect the scheduling of your project. So we're going to talk about entering tasks. The very first thing that we need to pay attention to is the task mode that you have set. There are two different modes. There is manually scheduled and automatically scheduled. The manually scheduled is the default in project. You can tell if it is the mode that your project is planned to be scheduled in by looking in the bottom left hand of your project screen. It'll tell you new tasks will be scheduled in, and it'll give you the mode right there. And you can also do that in a task-centric view like the Gantt chart. The manual schedule is noted by a teal pushpin, so you can know that those are how it is. That is a very user-controlled task. It's very much like Excel, where you can just create a task list. You can create connections with those tasks, but it is definitely a much more manually controlled schedule. There are certain things that aren't required for it to be entered, like a duration, start date, finish date, and it gives you a little different shaded bar over on the right-hand side, so you can easily see which tasks those are. Automatically scheduled task is our recommended task mode for recommending that you set it up. This is what I use. It allows for a very dynamic schedule. It allows you to put your tasks in there, link them up, and then say, all right, project, tell me what we're going to do. And it'll give you that. It can give you a look out into, I have all my tasks. When is the project scheduled to finish? And so you insert a new task. This is noted by a blue rectangle with an arrow and a blue bar off on the right-hand side for that easy distinction. And any information, all of the information will be calculated automatically when you put in a task. So any information you put, it'll automatically populate it with some work, some duration. It may have a 1-day question mark after it, but it does populate that for you. So a very important aspect to keep in mind before you even start entering your tasks is your work breakdown structure or your WBS. I still prefer work breakdown structure. This is the arrangement of your tasks in your hierarchical arrangement of project tasks into manageable work. This is basically the organization of your project. It is, when you schedule your project, do you normally know how it's going to flow from top to bottom? You know the steps, you know the flow. Or do you get handed a task list and you're told to organize it and put it into project? It does depend a lot on how you set up your project here. The first thing you have to do is think about how you can best organize what you do. Does it make sense to organize it by person, by phase, by stage? That's the very first piece in be able to create your work breakdown structure. Sometimes if you are using product at an organization level, it's helpful to discuss this as a team. What does your PMO need to see? What do they want to see? If you follow through very specific phases and stages in your schedule, that will help when it comes to initially creating your schedule and have that consistency. So there are 3 pieces that make up your work breakdown structure. There is your summary tasks, which is made up of all of the subtasks underneath it. It usually represents a deliverable. Then you have your tasks, which are those steps. And finally, we recommend you have a milestone at the very end, which usually marks the end or the completion of that summary task. So summary tasks, you can see in the example here, are bolded. They are bolded. They have those subtasks underneath it, and they do represent a roll-up of all of the tasks underneath it. It does summarize that. It will give you a roll-up. It's intended to just be a roll-up too. So with that being said, there are some nevers that have to do with summary task. You should never have relationships for those. They're just supposed to be that roll-up, that viewing for you. You're never supposed to assign resources to that summary task. Instead, you should assign those to the tasks that are underneath it. And you can see that they're bolded. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that it summarizes all the tasks underneath it by putting in a bracket. So when you're quickly looking at your Gantt, you can see which ones are summary and which ones aren't. The next part of your task planning should be the subtasks underneath it. The steps required to complete the work are your tasks. These are what will have those relationships, how you can connect all of your tasks together in a way that makes sense. These will also have an assigned resource if you're looking at doing resource planning. I do sometimes see no resources put on project, which is fine if that's all you really need. You're just very task centric, but you can have those resources assigned so you have that visibility into what are my resources doing, what are my people doing, and so you can see in the example here, those tasks are Subtasks, they're indented underneath that summary task above it. And then off on the right-hand side is where you do get that Gantt. Mine are blue because they're set to automatically schedule, but it'll give you that Gantt, the bar over there to represent the duration, and also the arrows to represent the dependencies. So with tasks, some of the best practices that we recommend are having your task names be short phrases, easy to understand, very quick. You can see in the examples here, determine project scope. It's a pretty straightforward task name. It doesn't repeat a lot of information. It doesn't give me information overload. It's very easy for me to look at this and see what it's asking. You can add notes, which will show an example of to your tasks to be able to provide more information if you need it. But in your task list, we recommend keep it short and sweet. And in the same manner, we have a best practice of don't repeat your summary name in your subtasks unless it specifically will add clarity. It's all about keeping it neat and again, keeping it very, very organized. And the final piece is the milestones. Project defines a milestone as any task that has a 0-day duration. It will automatically mark it as a milestone. You can also manually mark other tasks as a milestone if you need, but project by default will always mark a 0-day duration as a milestone. The milestones usually represent a significant moment in your project, completion of a deliverable, a completion of a phase or a stage, a major point in your project that you would like to see. And you can see in the example here that I have my milestone at the very bottom of my plan. And it's called Scope Complete. It's just an easy way for me to connect my tasks together and have that milestone that shows when all of the tasks above it have been completed, then mark my milestone as complete. And you can see over on the Gantt on the right hand, it's denoted by a black diamond with the date that it is scheduled. There's only one date because it's 0-day duration. There will only be one date associated with that milestone. So we talked about tasks and scheduling them and how short phrases should be the way that you do that. But if you need to add more details or requirements, you need to have determined project scope say more than just determined project scope. Then there is a note section. You can see those in reporting. They can be printed with your plans if you need them. They do provide a way for you to either have reference for yourself or for others that'll be accessing your plan the little notes about the additional notes and information about your tasks. So you can see in the example here, you can get to that notes section by looking at task information. You can see the task name we're looking at here is called Draft Preliminary Software Specifications, and then the note that's been entered underneath it is Refer to Infrastructure Diagram Document. And once you create that note and you save it, a little icon will appear in your indicators column that will tell you that there is a note. And if you hover, you can see exactly what it is right there. You don't need to click into anything else if you didn't want to. So now we're going to go back into project. I am going to start with a brand new project. Go to no to new. We're going to go to a new, just very, very blank project. So for today, our primary focus is tasks. So with that being said, we're going to be looking at the task ribbon for the most part. I can switch my view here, depending on what I want to see. There are several very task-centric views. I do prefer the Gantt for entering my tasks so I can see it on the left and on the right in a time scale. So I'm going to leave it as a Gantt, but you do have the option to change your view here if you'd like a different one. You do have a couple customizing options. You have your clipboard, your font, which are just pretty standard Microsoft features. And this section right here is how you will schedule. It will, we'll look at indenting and outdenting and how you update your task progress once your work has begun. Right here is the mode. My manually scheduled is grayed out now because I'm highlighted on project summary. It has to be auto-scheduled, same with summary tasks. But here is where you can set, different than the default, how you want a task to look if you want it to be auto or manually scheduled. You can see down below here that my new tasks are set to auto schedule. I can change that right here if I'd like to, but it does give you that visual cue so you know going in how your tasks are going to schedule. We are going to be working with our tasks right here a lot today, and you can insert here or you can enter it directly in the graph. We'll look at it both ways, and then we'll be looking at our task information over here as well. So we are going to start with our tasks. I am just going to go ahead and start typing my tasks list. I'm going to give them some pretty generic names for our schedule here. I'm just going to give it, say, what task 1, task 2, task 3. By default, it will, since I am auto scheduled, it's going to give them a 1-day duration with a question mark. Just means it's estimated. I haven't given project anything else to work with. That's all that it knows right now. It's just the name. And since we are going to work on best practices scheduling where we have our summary task, we're going to go ahead and add it in. We can say, we forgot, we needed to figure it out. We figured out how to organize our tasks. So we're going to come back up here. I'm going to click on task 1. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to say insert a task. And when you do that, a new task will be inserted directly above whatever task you have selected. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to say summary 1. Hit enter. And right now, all of my tasks are living at the same level. I don't have any work breakdown structure defined here. All of it's living at one level. I want to go ahead and put tasks 1, 2, and 3 underneath my summary task. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of these. I'm going to go ahead and indent up here. This is how you can create that structure for your plan, how you can create a very hierarchical design. And when I do that, you can see that it automatically promotes this task right here, summary 1, to a summary task. It made everything bolded over here. It gave me a bracket over here on my Gantt chart. And it is a roll up now of all of the tasks underneath it. Right now, they all start at the same time, but it will provide that roll up to me. So I'm going to go ahead and insert another summary task. I'm going to do it using my ribbon. This time I'm going to come up here to my insert section, again on my task tab, and I'm going to click insert summary task. And when I do that, it will automatically give me a summary task and one subtask underneath it. Because to be a summary task, you need to have a task underneath it. So I am going to rename this to say summary 2. And I'm going to give this task name of task 4. Let's see. Oh, looks like I put that under my summary 1. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight these two, and I'm going to outdent it so that this is its very own stage in my project schedule. I'm going to go ahead and name task 5, task 6. And if you get to be building out your schedule and you realize that you forgot a task, you need to go back in, you need to add one, you can just click anywhere in here and insert a task, similar to how we did with summary tasks. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add, I need a task 4A, and insert it there, and it'll just put it right there in your schedule. On the other hand, if you need to delete, you can come in here and you can either delete your task by right-clicking and clicking delete, or if you just want to leave the task here for reference and you don't want to remove it from your schedule entirely, you can choose to inactivate this task. It's up here in the schedule ribbon right here. And if you hover, it will give you a little tip. It'll let you know that your task will stay here. You can see it if you want to, but it won't affect your schedule. Project will skip straight over this task when it does that scheduling functionality. We're going to go ahead and activate that task. We say we don't need it after all. We're just going to have it kind of hide from the project's view, or from the scheduling engine view, rather. So I'm going to go ahead and create one more section for summary 3. I do need to outdent it so that it becomes a true summary, put some tasks underneath it. I'm going to indent these as well. So now I have some structure in place. I haven't had my milestones yet, but I have created the summary tasks and then the subtasks underneath it. So I can say maybe this is an initiate phase or a develop phase. So another kind of task that you can create here, different than those three, it's kind of a sub of a task, is called a recurring task. And a lot of times we see a request for this if you have a task maybe for a status report meeting. You have every Tuesday, you have a status meeting and you want to make sure you capture that in your schedule. You can add it here. You have your task here, and then you have a recurring task. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And this will tell you, this is how you set up the information about that recurring task specifically. I am going to call mine status meetings. I'm going to say we have a 1-hour status meeting. You can choose how frequently you have. I'm going to say it occurs once a week we will stick with Thursday, because that's today. I'm going to say it occurs once a week on Thursday. And then here's where I can set how long do I want this recurrence to set up. This is very similar to an Outlook recurring meeting, actually, now that I think of it. So we can go ahead and set that here. I'm going to say I want to have this continue for 6 weeks. And we don't need to schedule a calendar for that. But I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what it will do, I'm going to outdent it so its own, is it will create a whole new summary task with every instance of that recurring meeting or task underneath it. You can see it has it start to today, and then it goes every day, every Thursday from here until the end of November. And you can see over in the Gantt, you have your summary, but you have a little tiny 1-hour bar every week to represent that. If you have a task here, we're going to go back to our determine project scope from our example, and you need to add more details to it. You can either double click to open up your task information, which gives you a lot more granular detail about that task specifically, or you can come to task information up here. It will take you to the same place, so it's just a matter of preference. And here you can see the information about your task. You can see it here at a quick glance, but here you can see a lot more. You can set the duration here. You can set a couple of the data points about it, or you can set notes, which is what we had talked about. So we're going to add in a note. We're going to say, it's going to be very, very boring today, and we're going to say, this is my task note. And we're going to go ahead and click OK here. And as soon as I did that, I did generate an indicator in my indicators column over here. And if I hover over it, you can see your note straight from there. You also can add in, like I said, a notes column if you wanted to. This is how you can get it available for reporting, for printing. So you can add that here as well. I'm going to go ahead and hide my notes column, but it is available there. So now that we have put together our summary tasks and our subtasks, we're going to go back and add our milestones. And as we had discussed, a milestone will be the endpoint to your summary. It marks the milestone or marks the end of a deliverable most frequently. So we are going to add in right after task 3 to end the summary task, a summary 1. We're going to go ahead and enter a milestone right here. So you can either right click, and it will be a task, and we'll make it a milestone. So we're going to go ahead and insert a new task here. I'm going to call it milestone 1. So you can see over here, it's still not considered a milestone. I named it a milestone, but that doesn't make it a true milestone in project's eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here to my duration, because a milestone is defined as anything with a 0-day duration. And I'm just going to change it. I'm going to say it's 0 days, and it will automatically update all of this over here to be the black diamond with the date. So you can easily see this summary is going to be completed on 10/4. That's the milestone that I have set to complete that. So I'm going to come here, right? I'm going to click on summary 3. I'm going to add my summary, my milestone after summary 2. I'm going to click up here in the ribbon. I'm going to click on milestone, and it will insert that milestone directly above where I have selected. And since I did identify that task as a milestone already, it automatically gave it a 0-day duration. So now all I have to do is rename it. So we're going to add one more here. Use whichever method you choose. I'm a right clicker, so I'm going to go ahead and add my final milestone here. And I need to make it a 0-day duration task, so I'll mark it as a milestone. And we don't need a milestone after our status meetings there. So now that we have our structure in place, we can look at the different views, filters for seeing our information. We have a couple of different data points here to work with. We have some milestones in our schedule. We have some inactive tasks in our schedule. And you can use the view function in Microsoft Project to group or filter or highlight specific parts of your plan without actually changing anything. It's simply a filter. So we're going to come up here to our highlight ribbon, and we're going to do a drop down. There are several in here by default that you can use. You can see all down here in built-in. I recommend you come in and you just kind of flip through. Some of these might be really helpful for you. For highlight, I like to see the milestones. So I'm just going to click on milestones, and it will take everything with that 0-day duration, and it will highlight it for you, anything that you have marked as a milestone. And it'll highlight it right there for you. It doesn't change anything, but if you do decide you want to print it, it will print exactly that. Exactly what you see on your screen is what it will print. So you can hide your rows, you can choose what you want to see, but it will print everything that you see right there. Depending on how you want to report that to management, you can decide what you want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my highlight filter here. And then I'm going to look at my filter. So if you do have inactive tasks in your schedule, but on a day-to-day basis, you only are interested in seeing the information for your tasks that are active, using the filter is a really good way to do that. So we're going to click on our drop-down filter here. And one of the built-in ones here is active tasks. So we're going to notice that we have our task 4A here that's been inactivated. And we're going to go ahead and click active tasks here. And all it does is hide that from view. It's still there. So when you come in here, if you are looking for a task and it is gone, one of the very first things that you should look at is see, do I have a filter applied? Because a filter, it's not going anywhere. It's still there. You just can't see it. So I like using the active tasks a lot, especially when I use templates and you use the longest form of the project schedule you could possibly need. But if your project's a little bit different, you can go through and you can inactivate different sections, different tasks, and using the active tasks filter is a very good way to view only the information that's relevant to you. I'm going to go ahead and clear this filter. We're going to bring back our inactive task. You can also see here that it is it's grayed out. It's completely transparent. So if you were looking at that in your Gantt, you wouldn't be able to see it. Well, not really. And the group by here, I tend not to use the group by as much, but you are able to, if you use a lot of priority in your organization, you can set the priority at a task level and you can group it by that. It's a very easy way to see that. So you can see when you do that, I have my status meetings here for 1,000. That means it won't level them, and then it has the rest of mine under here. And it does give you this yellow bar here. It's for easy viewing. I'm gonna go ahead and clear that group. Do that again. Start from there. So now we're going to look at entering our work and duration estimates. So the difference between work and duration is work is the amount of effort, typically measured in hours, but it can be more, that it's going to take the resources to complete the task. So you can see in the example below that the task of requirement sessions has 20 hours of work for it. Duration is the elapsed time between the start and the finish date for that task. So you could see in the example here that duration and work don't always match. And actually most of the time they won't match because you need to set the amount of work, the number of hours. It is going to take me personally 8 hours to complete the task, but I'm not going to be able to finish it for 3 days. So in that case, you do get both pieces of information. You get the duration of 3 days and my work of 8 hours. Looking from project scheduling perspective, it defines one day as 8 hours. So if I'm having one day of work, that would be 8 hours, or 8 hours will equal one day, whichever way you'd like to look at it. But in my example of 3 days for 8 hours, it is different, and having all of that knowledge is very important to be able to schedule appropriately. So tasks are scheduled according to this formula below. It looks at work and duration and units to be able to schedule your task appropriately. We will look a lot more at how all of this comes together when you make changes to your task when we look at resource planning, which I believe is in 2 weeks. We'll do a lot of experimenting with, you have a work task, but you need to add a couple of resources to it. How does that change your task and the way that it's scheduled? Because changing a variable in this will affect one or both of the other variables in this. And so this is the equation you need to keep in mind when you do schedule. So we had talked very briefly about the 3 task types that are available. There is fixed units, fixed work, and fixed duration. The fixed units, if you have a task with fixed units, it's a task where the resources have a max units. They are available for 100% or 50% of their time for project work. So it's fixed. They can only work, a certain percentage per day on project work. And so any change that you make to the work or duration for that task will not affect the units. That's what's going to stay consistent in that task throughout any scheduling changes that you make. Fixed work and fixed duration are by far the 2 most popular. This is a decision that you need to make when you are trying to determine what's most important about scheduling your project. Are you focused more in the resources and the work? And if that's the case, then you should use a fixed work schedule. If you're more interested in specifically your timeline and the timing of tasks, then focusing on fixed duration is probably where you should be. You can also play around with it. You can have both different kinds in your schedule if they each have a different focus, but primarily organizations work with one or the other, as a pretty standard practice. So fixed work is where the task is what remains consistent or is a fixed value. Any changes that you make to the duration or a resource units will not affect the work that is associated with that task. And last is the fixed duration task. This is a task in which the duration is what is fixed or constant. And any changes that you make to the worker units will not affect the duration because it's fixed. That's what's going to stay the absolute same. And because task types is so important, and I want to make sure I have another visual here to help you see how these 3 interact together. So we're going to look at the very bottom one, fixed work for right now, and we're going to talk about how this one works. But you have your 3 primary types. You have duration, units, and work. And it's just a table to show, if you have fixed work task, that means your work is not going to change. It's going to be fixed. It's going to be constant. But if you do end up changing the duration, then if you do end up changing the duration here, then your work will not change, will absolutely not change because you have that fixed work type. But as a result, your units will change. If you change the units, your work will not change because again, we're working with fixed work. It's not going to change unless we change it ourselves as the project managers. But what will change is the duration. Something has to change. You can't have 2 things the same and one thing change. And then our last one here, if you change the work, you decide it's not 8 hours, it's 16 hours, and you can go and update that. It will now be a consistent 16 hours. Your resource units won't change, but the duration of the task will change. And so for fixed duration, it is very similar to that fixed work. Is you have the fixed duration, that is the timing, the duration of the task, how many actual days is it going to take? That is what is going to stay consistent. And so if you change your duration, which is what's fixed, you as the PM go in and update that duration, then your units won't change, but the amount of work associated with that task will change. If you change your units, then your duration will change, absolutely fixed, but your work will change. And then here, if you come in and you change the work, then your duration's fixed. It won't change, but the units associated will change for your resources. I know that's a lot of repeating the same words over and over again, but we'll look at a couple of examples here in just a moment. So once you have entered all your tasks, you've created that structure. We haven't linked them together, but we want to put our estimates in there first, either for work or duration or both. It's time to do your estimates here. So we talked a little about how you can have two different kinds of ways that you look at your schedule. You have your organization's focused on duration, on business days, working days. How long is it going to take to finish this project versus the hours based? So a duration-based planning is a scheduling method that is a little bit easier to manage and estimate and track because your estimates are provided as days, 1 day, 4 days. And the work is calculated whenever you put resources to that. It's automatically calculated there, as long as you have automatically scheduled. You would use the percent complete versus percent work complete to track the progress. You'll enter in duration values. You'll focus simply on any of the duration columns available there. Your task duration can range from minutes to months. You can do any scale that you'd like. But the cons of working with a duration-based schedule is that when you're looking at forecasting, your information is going to be less accurate because you're not looking at the actual work time that your resources are spending on those tasks. It's automatically calculating that for you. Your cost calculations are going to be less accurate as well for those same reasons. If you have a resource that has a rate and it's saying the rate is $100 an hour, and I schedule that resource for 1 day of work, it's going to automatically calculate 8 hours of work and $800 cost associated with that resource. If it doesn't actually take them 8 hours, it takes them 6, then my cost is off for that task. On the other side, there is the work-based or effort-based planning. With this, you specify the work estimates for your task, and project will automatically calculate the durations based off of that. When you are looking to track, you'll look at the actual work, the remaining work, and the work-related data points associated. When you are looking at work, it does make it a bit easier to understand the exact causes of why your schedule is slipping or why your costs are coming in higher or lower because you have a little bit more exact data to refer back to. But it does take a lot more setup. It's a little bit more difficult to manage. You have to be a little bit more tedious with it, but it will provide you a much, much more accurate forecasting when you're looking at the future because you're letting the schedule and the work dictate where your plan is. So we're going to insert in that task type. That way we can see what each of our tasks is set to. So I'm going to insert a new column, I'm going to insert in type. By default and automatically, any of your summary tasks will be fixed duration because it is a roll up. It's going to tell you what that is. Just leave those alone. And for the subtasks here is where you can change it. So I have fixed work set as my task type here. So I can come over here. So knowing that's in mind, it's going to be important for me to enter in my work estimates at least. I can come over here. So I'm going to put in my work column as well. That's not here by default. So I'm going to enter in work. I can see it's 0 across the board because I haven't entered in anything. I've only typed in my names. I am just going to start typing in some hours here. We have fixed work for 8 hours. We have task 2, that's 16 hours. Let's see, let's give task 3 24 hours. And you can see anything that was affected by the change that I typed into my schedule will be rolled up in blue. Will be shown in blue rather. So you can see it affected this task and it affected my summary task, which makes sense. That's a roll up. And it also affects my project summary task, which is a very, very, very roll up. I'm going to change these tasks to be a fixed duration. And I'm just going to enter in some estimates here. I'm going to enter in the duration part. I'm going to say just 5 days, 10 days. Oops, that doesn't matter so much. 10 days and 15 days here. And again, you can see anything that was affected is automatically rolled up. It affects my duration for summary and the finish date for that task. So for this last one right here, I'm going to keep it as a fixed work task, but I'm going to go ahead and enter in my work and duration. This is the absolute most information I have about my my tasks. I'm going to go ahead and insert it here. I'm going to go ahead and enter, let's see, 12 hours for that task, 2 days, 10. We still have some estimated here. So we've gone through oops, don't mean to say that. So we've gone through entering our tasks and setting some work and estimate durations. We are only having a 1-hour webinar today, so we are going to wrap up here. But next week, we will go ahead and talk more about the task planning. We're going to link our projects together. Our tasks together, rather. We're going to link our tasks. We are going to then the week after that, on the 7th, look at resource planning with Microsoft Project, which will work a lot more with these tasks type. I'm probably going to pull up this same schedule and work with it a bit. I'll probably even attach it actually to the webinar so that you have it to work along right with me. So if you have any questions, you can email me directly. There is my email address right there, or you can go to our website, sign up for the other webinars that we have coming up. I am very excited about this webinar series, so hopefully you are too. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I hope you have a great Thursday.